All right. Well, Ashley, so good to finally talk with you face to face, so to speak.
Yes, thank you for having me.
Yes, this is going to be great. Well, if you're good, we'll just jump right in. I'll just remind you that it's a pretty chill conversation. You only share what you want to share, but really, this is your story. I'll take you back in time a little bit and talk through some of your experiences. Feel free to add as much detail or as little detail as you feel comfortable with. And yeah, let's tell your story and then talk near the end more on your psychedelic journey and what that means to you personally. I would love to dive in a little bit about getting into being a dietitian and what that means for you personally as well. And otherwise, just enjoy a good conversation for the next 45 minutes to an hour.
Yeah, awesome. Awesome. That sounds good to me.
Okay. Any questions for me before we start?
No, no,
Okay.
that sounds good.
All right.
Um, where to even begin, I guess, is probably always what everyone is thinking. Um, Kind of my military history is I was a Marine from 2006 to 2012. I was an intelligence analyst and did a couple of tours overseas. One to Iraq in 2008 and Afghan in 2010. Iraq in 2008 was pretty calm, to be honest.
Where were you?
I was in Al Assad, so we did kind of like base security. I did a lot of kind of like intel collections. So Al Assad, that was a pretty like, I mean, I was only 21 years old, so that also being said, 21-year-old girl in combat, really. So my second tour to Afghan in 2010, I was a mom. I was only 6 months postpartum. And so that was very challenging. And then I was part of the FET team. The FET teams, the female engagement teams.
Yep.
So kind of similar to the Army's CST teams. Two females were attached to infantry patrols due to their like cultural barriers. So yes, so that was a busy tour for me personally. I was an intel analyst, so working 12 to 18-hour shifts, providing briefs to our commanding officer on everything that was happening in our area of operations, and then also going out on patrols and being part of the FET team. It's kind of one of those things where we got there and then they were like, we need more females. Who do you have who wants to try out? So there was 200 of us over a 2-week course, bunch of shooting packages, a bunch of stuff, and then 40 of us kind of made it through. And then we were dispersed within the units for utilization.
Okay. Well, that's an incredible amount of detail in such a short period of time, right? Like you've got so much packed into so few years. You and I were in Iraq at the same time. I was there '08 to '09,
Okay.
southern Baghdad, and in many ways, if we were to try to compare combat related experiences in Iraq, the area I was in, I've got a good buddy of mine who was in that exact same area, what we call the Triangle of Death, 2 years earlier, and experienced the full force of hell unleashed on those units. 2 years later, much had calmed down, but we were still at high risk of working with Iraqi army and them planting bombs during the day and then working with us at night. And yeah, yeah, it's
Yeah, I can totally relate to that. As an intel analyst, the story that I tell friends or maybe people that aren't super familiar, like have an understanding of the military, a lot of what I did as an intel analyst and part of FET were humanitarian missions. And I just remember this woman, like, and a local Afghan woman, these bright green eyes, just all I can remember are her beautiful, bright green eyes looking back at me, and like 7 children just like boom, 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 boom. You know, probably one every year.
Yep.
And her looking at me, and we had met before, and I had showed her, like, I carried a picture of my son with me, a baby, and I said, like, I'm a mother too, and I really truly believe that is a way that I connected with them
100%.
and did my job better. Right, at the end of the day, we're all humans, and we were mothers. And she said to me, like, I'm going to do whatever I have to do to feed my children, to get my children water. Like, mother to mother, I'm going to, like, I hope you understand, I'm going to do, if they are going to pay me to and place IEDs, or if you're going to, like, I'm going to do whatever I need to do to survive and to have my children survive.
Yeah, that's a hard reality that coming from the United States, we can't really comprehend. But as a motherly instinct, a she bear, so to speak, you know what it means to try to protect your loved ones, right? And I agree that bond that you shared with her in that moment, green eyes coming from probably a Russian influence in the past, or there were so many cultures that mixed all at once over the last 400, 500 years in Afghanistan, which just makes it a melting pot. But
I think for most Americans, it's very hard to think or even imagine to live outside of our privilege that we really do have. I've done quite a bit of traveling. As you know, I'm living in Australia right now. I've traveled to South America. I've traveled to a lot of places. And, I think for many Americans, they really, truly do not fully grasp their level of privilege.
Yeah, I'm glad you say that, because it's important to identify that gap in our understanding of global events when we are located in a bubble in the United States. And my father was military. We traveled around the world with all of the different duty stations he was in, Europe especially. And I got exposure there, which made it so exciting for me to want to go into the military myself and travel the globe and see things. I have an older daughter who's 20, and she's currently serving in East Africa, a mission for our church. And she's experiencing the full force of a culture in a poverty-stricken area, and what it means. Like, when you want to go to the market, you walk for 2 hours, and everybody around you may be barefoot and you might be wearing sandals, but like, this is the reality of much of what the world has to deal with. And I love that experience for her, because she's safe, but she's also getting that exposure that says, Dad, like, it's going to be hard for me to integrate back into the United States because we have so much waste. And I was like, I know, I've been there. I've done that math in my own mind as I've come home from deployments. I know.
Yes. I think, our American privilege, it's like two-thirds of the world does not even live like that. And I know my own personal military experiences and my travels have also, brought me back to this place of considering our utilization of resources and just having, like, on a day-to-day practice, gratitude for what you do have, gratitude for, just the simple things like food and water and, clean food, good food, access to clean water, the level of privilege that we as Americans really do have.
Yeah. No, that's a great point. I don't know that we make that point enough on this channel. And mind you, it's a global audience of 90,000 plus subscribers who are from all over Middle East, Europe, Asia. And many of these listeners today might be able to relate to that a little bit more and say, yeah, well, that's my life. I sleep on the floor. I don't use a pillow. What's a pillow? Right? I just throw a little blanket over myself or wear a longer outfit when I go to bed. Very different. So what's hidden behind the deployments here is the effect that it will have on people. So Ashley, what effect did a young 20-year-old person experience being in combat in Iraq, and then just a few short years later going back into Afghanistan, which is a totally different operating environment?
Yeah, Yeah, I think what it created, I am a tough little Irish girl. I grew up with brothers. I grew up in the Midwest, kind of in like farming country. So I've always been kind of like a tough woman. But you do all these things, and really what it came down for me was my nervous system was so dysregulated. I came back from both of these deployments, I would say an intelligent, hardworking person, and was doing all these things for 10 years. Like I served 6 years, I got out, and for 10 years, I did 2 degrees in science. So like I'm a dietitian, so 2 degrees in science, understanding how the body really works on a biochemical, neurochemical level. And honestly, I think that was one of the saving graces for me, is that understanding of my body and my nervous system and what was actually happening. Because I think I would have felt a lot crazier than what I did. Right. So I was in school learning these things, and then also implementing a healthy diet. I've always been an athlete, so a solid exercise routine. I was doing all the things for like what felt like a long time, 10 years. And my nervous system was still in constant fight or flight, constant hypervigilance, to the point where like living in my body felt hard, frustrating. I think a lot of us veterans then use substances to try to cope, numb, not feel that all the time, right? Even myself, I've had a long history of my relationship with alcohol, and then finding plant medicine really changed my life. I think I was in a very desperate place. And then I found the Heroic Hearts Project. And I think I know you've interviewed David from Becoming Om. So I had life-changing experiences with the Heroic Hearts Project and Becoming Om that, I really do think the plant medicine was the thing that really helped me re-regulate my nervous system. And I continue to have a relationship with plant medicines. And I say medicines because I truly believe they are medicines when used in the right way, in a supportive setting with the right intentions.
That's a powerful testimonial that I continue to hear repeated over and over again with people I interview, especially veterans and first responders who have seen this outreach on social media that says, if you've tried therapy and if you're still struggling, if you can't turn off that central nervous system fight or flight, other areas of your body are starting to break. Your mood, your temperament, your mental focus, all of these things start to break down. Not to mention physiologically, we put on weight, we start to turn to substances. For me, it was more isolation, pushing away from society, pushing back. If I were to dim this light, it became dark for me everywhere. And this idea of medicine or plants being put on earth for a reason, which give us the benefit of finding additional healing. You know what? I'm very religious, very spiritual, and it's been taboo for way too long to discuss the psychedelic benefits for people. And it's hard for me because I haven't done it yet. And I say the word yet because I will do it. And I look forward to that experience where I can really step forward in healing so much more. You mentioned your education, which I think is such a powerful testament to your mental fortitude while you're struggling, and maybe you're not dealing with things right, but you're still progressing.
Yeah, I think, when I think of young men going off to war versus women, I think there's a component there. I had these 2 little bright blue eyes, my son, that were looking back at me, that was, counting on me. So when I got out because I was scheduled to deploy again, and my son was only 2 years old. And I just couldn't keep doing that. I give it to the women that serve 20 years. And my best friend is finishing up her 20 years in a year or two, and, has spent more time away from her twins than she has with them. And so I give it to them. It's such a hard thing to do.
Yeah.
But I had those, like, my son looking back at me, counting on me. I'm so grateful for the GI Bill. I think more people should use it. The post 9/11 is an amazing benefit that, we have earned. But my education and learning what I learned really, I do think, is a piece that helped save me. My relationship too, like we were talking about the hypervigilance. Yeah, I used alcohol more than I want to admit as a depressant. I was so physically exhausted from living in that hypervigilant state, like knowing and doing all the things, meditating, exercising, eating well. And I would say, like, that is better than most people. And still just like the nervous system not calming down.
Yeah.
And it's taken a lot of practices, and I'm still working on my daily practices. The plant medicine helped a lot. I almost think it was like a reset that I needed. And then to reconsider our relationship with these things in our life. Or I think that that's what plant medicine really helped me do, is reconsider relationships. My relationship with alcohol, my relationship with people in my life. The schooling was a big part, and understanding what was like happening in my body was a big part. I think that like really helped save me.
Yeah.
I see so many veterans like struggle with alcohol. And of course, their nervous system, they're in fight or flight, they're hypervigilant, their nervous system is out of whack. And of course, they want to take a depressant or use a depressant to slow it down. I always use the phrase, like, I feel like I'm living at Mach 45.
Yeah.
Right? Like, my brain is thinking so fast. And when you've lived, for many of us that have done multiple tours and going out on patrol day in and day out, like, your nervous system is rewired for, scanning everything.
Yep.
And I still live with some of that. I sit on the back of an airplane. I sit in certain places in the restaurant. Do I like it about myself? No. Do I think it's weird? Yes. Do I still do it? Yes. It's still like a safety thing that I still do.
Yeah. Well, I've been there, and I didn't even recognize it at first. My wife did. She'd be like, "Why do you keep looking at those guys over there?" And I would just say, "Because I'm trying to measure up and see if I can take them." And she's like, "Why would you do that? We're just at a restaurant." I'm like, "But what if they turn on us right now?" I would kick that guy's knee backwards. I would punch that dude in the throat. Like, before I knew it, we would be out that exit right there. And she's like, "You are going crazy." And I was.
And then can you imagine if you're a woman and you're doing that, right? Like, I feel like it's so much more societally acceptable if it's a man. But then, like, you're a 5'1" woman and, like, you're doing that. Yeah.
Well, we all go through the same thing. And, the mental struggle is real because we start to identify that our body's not functioning, our mind's not functioning properly, especially if we do comparison, which I don't like comparisons, but if we do comparisons with the mass of people around us and we're like, what is happening? And the saddest part is when we as veterans start to feel like we're the only one. And I did for a long time. I reached out to another veteran that I knew. He was a Marine. And I said, "Hey man, like, I'm starting to spin. I'm really struggling. I'm always super noise sensitive, touch sensitive. Like, it's really getting to me." And he's like, "Really? I can't relate." And I was like, "Oh, Okay. Must be me. And it was too bad
Yeah, I can
because,
totally relate to that hypersensitivity too. I think so many veterans, right, that comes with the hypervigilance, that comes with what's happening with our nervous system. Um, I also, if we're hypervigilant and feeling this way, I think even just like social engagements then again feel like so much more like, oh, that feels like a task, right? I'm already hypervigilant and then I'm in this social setting. So it increases the hypervigilance and it can almost feel exhausting. So many veterans kind of just isolate. With that being said, I also think a true part that like helped really save me was sense of community. I worked in the veterans office. We need that sense of community of people who can relate. Me going on that trip with Heroic Hearts, I went with 8 other female veterans. That was deeply important. Heroic Hearts is doing such an amazing job where it's like men's groups, it's females, it's LGBTQ, it's wives, Gold Star wives, right? Like, so we can have that sense of camaraderie and community and understanding with our people. And so I think a part of it is also community, checking in on our veterans, our friends. I know if I haven't heard from some of my friends for a while, I'm like, checking in, checking in, haven't heard from you. You going inward, I'm just checking in on you. So that sense of community and finding groups that we feel like we fit in or are a community to is important.
yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that checking in because I kind of had a rough week last week. The last couple of days of the week, I just really started to struggle. And I mentioned something on a post, and one of the guys I interviewed in the last, I don't know, 4 months, a great dude. Anyway, he reached out to me on text today, and he's like, "Michael, checking in. How are you? How you feeling?" And he's not the only one. There have been several other people in the last little bit that have done that, and I was so genuinely grateful that he was paying attention. And I said, it means the world to me that you just asked, and I'm doing so much better. Today I got out of the house more. I went and worked out a couple of times. It felt good. So I'm in a good place today. So thanks for reaching out. And that same sentiment is what we've got to do for each other.
Just that simple text, right? It doesn't even have to be much. Just that simple check-in. I'm thinking about you. How you doing? Right? That sense of community. We're not alone in this. Someone is checking up on us. I think another big part of my healing in this whole process too would be my commitment to movement. Even on those days that we're depressed, right? I have always done some kind of level of fitness. And for the last couple of years, I have gone to this place called F45. It's like a chain gym. But those are also my people, right? If they don't see me for a few days, they're like, yo, girl, where are you?
Yeah.
It's like, oh, okay, right, I'm isolating or I'm tired and I just don't want to. But even them are checking in, right? So creating these senses of community with whatever it is. It could be, it doesn't have to be physical fitness, but creating these pockets of community. So when we tend, as many of us veterans tend to do, self-isolate,
Yep.
swing to the all or nothing,
Yep.
we can kind of be checked or get checked in on.
Yeah. With your education focusing on being a dietitian, right? So that's, and to distinguish a dietitian from a nutritionist is more like a hobbyist who has some information and they work with it. But a dietitian is really the upper level skill set that's required for coaching and mentoring people in their nutrition. And it's an area right now that I really love. I love learning about, and especially when we start to get outside of the normal foods that we normally consume and look at fermented foods. I'm looking in that a lot to see how to balance my gut health and my brain health at the same time. Tell me what the work you do as a dietitian, what it does for you personally.
Yeah, I remember thinking about getting out of the Marines because I told you I was up for that next deployment, and I was just like, man, I can't leave my baby again. But like, what am I going to get out and like study? Because I knew I was going to go to school. If I was going to get out, I was going to go to school. And I was like, what am I going to study? And I have always been an athlete my whole life. I grew up in the Midwest, in kind of like farm country in Minnesota, and my mom is always kind of been a hippie. We've always like had a really big garden and grew a lot of our own food. And so it's kind of just like, all right, I'm going to study food. I love food. Food fuels the body, right? So I was going to become a dietitian. As you mentioned, anybody can get like certifications in nutrition, but to become registered dietitians is what we call it in America. It is an undergraduate degree, a challenging undergraduate degree, might I add, as well. A lot of science courses. I was finishing up my undergrad and was going to apply to med school. And the only class that I needed after all of my nutrition courses was one physics class to apply to med school. So it is like a very challenging degree. And then we need a 1-year internship to be able to even sit for your board exams, kind of similar to like a registered nurse.
Yeah.
So you do 1 year of an internship. So you're working 40 hours a week with dietitians at various capacities. And then you sit for your board exam. Now last year in 2024, you have to have a master's degree to become a registered dietitian. So I also have a master's degree in nutrition. My master's degree is in integrative and functional nutrition. So kind of like what you were talking about, like using food as medicine.
Yeah.
Fermented foods, right? We have the gut-brain connection.
Yes.
There's so much cool research going on right now with the gut-brain connection, and how our gut is really, or our gut microbiome is really kind of our second brain. And I would even challenge if it's not kind of our first.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So our gut microbiome and so much is derived in our mental health, our mood, our stability. A lot of times when I'm talking to veterans about nutrition, if we are in, our diet, the quality of our diet, not that it has to be perfect. I'm an all foods fits dietitian, balance in everything.
Yep.
Balance in nutritious foods or nutrient dense foods and also fun foods, but a healthy balance of those two things. And the healthier our gut microbiome is, the better we balance our blood sugars. The better we balance our blood sugars, the better our hormones are. And our hormones and our neurotransmitters are really what creates everything, our mood, everything. And even when we're talking about psychedelics, I really do think that, or we know, right, that they do affect or change or alter the gut microbiome as well, right? They have DMT, but they also help, especially things like ayahuasca or psilocybin, alter or improve the gut microbiome.
I didn't know that. Yeah. I interviewed a girl recently, and I'll post her interview hopefully tonight. Her name is Caroline. She lives locally to me here in northern Utah. Came across her expertise almost by accident, and she is a hormone specialist, and she works with women, talking through cycle, hormone changes, all of these things, balancing out estrogen and what's the other one called?
Testosterone, progesterone.
Yeah, progesterone, right? And that balance that needs to happen, and talking about healing so many ailments that women have to go through. And I said, well, imagine a woman who goes into combat and fight or flight kicks in and it gets stuck in fight. The hormones in a guy will start to change, and we'll see that there's a spike for a little bit in combat with testosterone, and then we see the research start to show that testosterone starts to really take a dive. And I think the same thing happens with a woman. Like, not only does her cycle maybe even stop at certain points because of the high stress, but the estrogen will start to take a dive as well as the progesterone become unbalanced, and it leads to brain fog, fatigue, which increases the likelihood that we're going to have emotional and mental struggles as it progresses if it's not balanced well, right?
Yeah, in my private practice that I work at, I work with many similar things. As registered dietitians, we're trained on all of that. So I also work with women. I would even say like men, right? Like what you were talking about with the testosterone, and not only like veterans, but America's industrialized productivity and then the chronic stress that creates. I work with also a lot of men that just even like low grade chronic stress over time, it affects testosterone.
Yeah.
It puts testosterone on the floor. So bringing people back to practices, I'm not only talking to my clients about nutrition, I'm talking to them about stress and, you know, like management of all of those things, because that everything, we are a whole person, right? I think American modern medicine wants to, you know, conceptualize it into these little specialties, but we are a whole person. So I really take like an integrative, holistic, whole person approach when I work with my clients. And then, yeah, you throw that veteran, combat veteran aspect on top of it. And re-regulating hormones, it takes a lot of conscious work and effort in nutrition, sleep.
I'm glad you mentioned sleep. Yeah, that's almost a forgotten element. I'm working to partner with a sleep solution company to provide quality mattresses and pillows and blankets to first responders and veterans, to make it a priority to get the necessary sleep to recover, because that recovery not only depends upon, you know, the muscles, but it also has a lot to do with this. Yes. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. That's great. Wow, I'm so glad you mentioned sleep, because that's such an important aspect on healing.
And I think so many veterans struggle with sleep. Me too. I have a long history of struggling with sleep, and even with all of my knowledge, like I still struggled with it, right? Something that I do use with a lot of my clients are things like GABA. You can get GABA, right? It's a neurotransmitter. I tried a bunch of the stuff. I tried all the VA's protocols. It was not working for me. It was not working for my sleep, for my nightmares, for my hypervigilance. Plant medicine was a big game changer for me. Microdosing also significantly changed that for me. My relationship with coffee and caffeine. And then a couple of...
What does that mean for us, Ashley? What does that mean, the relationship with coffee and caffeine?
Just like reconsidering your relationship with coffee and caffeine. And don't get me wrong, I love coffee. Love it. And now I live in Australia and we have amazing coffee here. But I already have a hypervigilant nervous system to start off with. And then I'm adding a cup of a CNS stimulant as well. So I think that is a big thing. You have to do like an elimination diet before you go do some of these plant medicines. So I didn't have coffee for a month. And that was kind of the big Kickstarter for me to like really reconsider my relationship with caffeine. Something that I still am like working on, because I love coffee. I love it. And I think so many people do. And America runs on caffeine. I know that.
So do gyms.
Yeah. All these supplements that have like 200 milligrams of caffeine, or these drinks, that is a lot. A cup of coffee has like approximately 90 grams. So these 200 milligrams in these supplements, yeah, like super concerning. That's a CNS stimulant. I could talk about that for days. But yeah, right, we were in the military. So many of us had Red Bulls, Rippets. You remember those? Like
I do. Drinks, right? They used to give them to us.
Yes. So I think we already have this, and we build a tolerance, right? Yeah. We build tolerance with alcohol, nicotine, caffeine. We build tolerances to these substances.
Yeah.
And I think I just want to touch on these substances and even like what society deems them as acceptable, right? Like in America, coffee is an acceptable substance.
Yep.
Alcohol is an acceptable substance. Alcohol is a class 1 carcinogen. Like, we know that.
Yeah.
So I challenge the thought of like some of these medicines that are plants that literally grew on this earth, you know, and are Schedule 1 drugs in our country. These are plants that grow on this earth.
Yeah.
Mushrooms grow everywhere
Yep.
on this earth. So considering our relationship with these substances and our views on these substances and how they've been maybe manipulated by society and politics.
Politics. Yeah. Yeah. If veterans had access to psychedelics in a controlled space, not including the spirituality of it, because I know there's a huge spiritual element to it, right? Not including that, but just that piece alone could help veterans progress in their release of built up trauma and start that recovery journey. However, I'm always a little bit afraid when the government gets involved when it comes to our medicines. You mentioned the word holistic, and I'm not sure if I told you that I'm starting a holistic business. Did I mention that to you?
No.
Okay, I won't go into it now, but you and I'll just talk right after this. But the modern medicine is deficient in so many areas, and like you said, treats each person in a silo, and they don't look at anything around them. I know a young man who lived in South America for a couple of years and lost an extreme amount of weight and moved back to the United States, went to doctors, and nobody could give him an answer. And then I sent him to a gut health specialist who works holistic medicine, and she did some tests, and it's easy to find what's wrong. But modern medicine puts it in a box and says, wait, insurance won't cover it. They won't support this. Don't even go there. And I ran into that recently when it comes to hormones. I did my testosterone checks. And if this is the measurement and this is the low, I'm sitting right here. So they say, oh, you're great. I'm like, that's below average. And they're like, no, that's great. I'm like, I am not below average. I don't want to be below average. And when was the last time that this comparison of data was changed? Well, it's been 100 years. Why? Our lifestyles are different. The foods we eat are different. Our environment's different. The stress is different. And you're saying that this hasn't shifted, because I think the new testosterone normal is here. So I'm out of that range right now. So I started to do TRT to get me back in this range where I feel like we need to be today. And I can tell you, I feel much clearer in mind, much better about what I'm doing physically, and it all contributes, mind, body, gut. So modern medicine, unfortunately, has created a World War I scenario where they're building a trench and saying nothing can cross this line. And I can't disagree more.
Ooh, you trying to tick all the boxes of the things that really get me fired up?
That's why I wanted you on the channel.
Could not agree with you more. I challenge the statement of America, if we are the great. The systems, I truly believe, are meant to keep us sick, and the systems do work together.
100%.
Our food system there is something deeply, deeply wrong with our food system. At the benefits of, large food companies. And I think that is one component. Big pharma is another component. I think we're kind of seeing this very politically in America right now. And I think these systems are meant to keep us sick. Truly. as a registered dietitian who accepts insurance, and yes, there are all of these things that we have to go around for insurance to literally accept and pay for things that are the bare minimum. These ranges, there's conventional medicine and then there's integrative and functional medicine. So those standards or those ranges are really the bare minimum.
Yes.
That's not optimal, right? Those are bare minimum ranges. And then we're talking over here in integrative and functional nutrition or medicine about optimal ranges for like living our best, being our best. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I'm so glad that you agree with me, because what the I'm so excited to talk to you about it, but I'm gonna have to wait. I haven't launched yet. But make America healthy again. I have high hopes, but I also know that it's government trying to affect big business, and money's always involved. And there may be some saving graces in this program, which will be better than it has been, but I don't know if it's going to get us in 4 years moved far enough in the right direction, or if the next group will pick it up and carry it even further so that it pushes our food to being better. And you and I, who have traveled the globe, can easily see the truth behind that with our food. If I go to Canada and I buy Oreos, and I buy Oreos in the United States, the ingredient list in the United States is about 2 inches longer than it is in Canada.
We have one of the lowest food standards on the globe. We have one of the lowest food standards for, a first world nation. We have one of the lowest food standards.
Why?
Because those things are cheap and they're easy and they're not being checked is really what I think. Like, power isn't being checked, right? These food companies, it's cheaper, it's easier to make and use this. Also, I want to point out that there are food scientists out there that literally just researched like the psychology behind food and us eating more food. For example, a cheese puff, that crunch our brain likes, but then it crunches into these tiny little pieces and we can eat a lot of them.
Yep.
There are food scientists and psychologists that work together to create a lot of our like processed and refined foods. And I work with eating disorders. I work with disordered eating. I work with all different things, but that's mainly what I work with, which there's a high rate of disordered eating with veterans as well. And so I'm not demonizing processed and refined foods, but again, I think we should consider our relationship with those foods and like how we want to feel. So many of us are disconnected from our body, the body that we're living in, are scared of our feelings, thoughts, don't like the body that we're living in. So there's this huge disconnect, but there are like food scientists that create foods just so we consume more. And America is not doing a good job right now with regulation, and it is deeply out of control at the pockets of certain individuals.
Yep. Yeah, and it's unfortunate that there are deliberate attacks on health. I don't know if it's a deliberate population control measure that says we will decrease, 200,000 a year from heart attack.
It always comes down to three things.
Yeah.
Money, power, and greed. Right? Like, we're living in an overpopulated world. And right now we are all, or the world, it's just money, power, and greed at the expense of whoever, right? At expense of the average person, regular person. So I think that's what it comes down to. I think it comes down to money, really. On a happier note, I think in terms of nutrition science or science, we are moving into individualized and personalized nutrition. We can have these like guidelines for, right, like the guidelines for the average American.
Yep.
That's like the basics. but we're all individual people, and we have a lot of really cool new tests. I do a lot of like gut microbiome tests in my practice. There's a lot of really cool new testing, hormone testing. I use this test called the Dutch test, a dried urine test. That's a really cool test that you can do. Unfortunately, insurance doesn't pay for it, but it's like $500. I use another test for any kind of like gut GI issues, mood stuff. That's called GI map.
Yes, I've done it.
Yeah, it's a stool test. It's a really great test.
Changed my life.
Yeah, I will tailor people's nutrition, their probiotics, what types and strands of probiotics I might recommend to kind of balance the gut microbiome back out, or talk to them about kind of what they're putting in.
Yeah.
Again, like alcohol affects our gut microbiome. These things affect our gut microbiome. So I'm not saying, good and bad. I also don't like good, bad, healthy, unhealthy. But like, where's the balance of all of these things? And I think that's the hardest thing in life in general, right? Yeah. The balance of it all.
Yeah, I think if we can start to educate our kids, our youth in intuitive eating, then they can find that balance, because the body wants to speak to us, right? It wants to say, I need protein, I need some carbs for energy, I need some good fats, like, and an occasional piece of chocolate, right?
I teach intuitive eating in my practice so much. I teach intuitive eating. I work with a lot of kids. We are so far from intuitive eating, or like, I even would just say like listening and honoring and respecting our body.
Yes.
Our body, we as human beings, our body is really, really super smart. And if we just listen a little bit, work with a professional, work with a registered dietitian, work with a therapist. I'm promoting these things, but also if we just listen, I love Oreos too, but if I eat a whole sleeve of Oreos, like I don't feel good. I don't feel good. If I just eat salad every day, I don't feel good. Mm-mm. This balance of these foods, right? And with the guidance of a professional dietitian, whatever, I think also is really good. And teaching people to listen, honor, and respect their bodies, and that they are all, our bodies are home to like navigate on this earth, and they are all supposed to be different. There isn't a superior body type. And if we come back to just like love and respect, I think we can change a lot.
Yeah, I appreciate your testimonial there on not judging ourselves harshly when it comes to our choices of foods. What happens one day we can recover from in the next 2 days. We don't have to look over our shoulder all the time and hold ourselves in judgment. I love that you're teaching intuitive eating, because that's not something that's normal for us. It's something that we have to adjust our minds a little bit to be able to understand better. And promoting yourself is totally good. I hope you do. I hope more people grab hold of your gifts and find a healthier, happier way to live. I think that's what our goal is. In the last couple minutes here, Ashley, I've enjoyed this conversation very much. What advice would you give my global audience today who is kind of stuck in a rut of poor nutrition, emotional trauma, and want to find another way for experiencing life and joy again?
I think reaching out to professionals like myself. I think the therapeutic relationship is really important. Reach out to a friend. I always say, like, most of my clientele find me by referral, and I'm actually really proud of that.
That's awesome.
So reach out to people that you trust. Ask them, hey, do you have a therapist that you really like? I'm really struggling. Hey, do you have a dietitian? Reach out to specialists that specialize in these areas. Sense of community is so, so, so important, I think. Finding whatever that community is, like we were talking about, that can check up on you. I think, globally, loneliness, I think, is the biggest killer, they say nowadays. So sense of community. We were not, as human beings, we're not meant to live in these isolated lives. We were meant to live in community. Think about the people that live the longest are these cultures that live in like community with different generations. So I traveled with Cordy and David to Peru, and to see 4 or 5 generations live in community with each other was like deeply healing to me, and just so apparent that like what we're doing in America is just really not good. So reach out to anyone, find your sense of community, and then there's so many of us specialists out there. So, ask, or even insurance. Like, I take insurance. So ask for a registered dietitian that works with eating disorders, a registered dietitian that works in integrative and functional. Like, I have all of those specialties with myself. I know therapists have that. So that's what I would say. Or even within your veteran community, I think. I know, at least in my experience as a woman veteran, we're always trying to help each other. Like, you need this resource. I got it. I got you, girl. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
find a female veteran, because she's got like 50 resources for you.
Well, I found one. Yeah. Thank you so much, Ashley. This has been so much fun and so educational, and I love interviews where I can experience that and also clearly identify that as a young soldier, Marine, you experienced some trauma. You've had to deal with it, and you're coming out on the other side after deliberate approaches to healing with plant medicine and finding this trajectory of finding joy and then helping other people, which also includes that process of healing as well. I thank you for your time, and I'm so glad that we found a connection and we're able to make this happen, even from Australia.
Yes, thank you so much. I hope that this message can help even just one veteran. That's all I care about, is helping our community heal together.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you.